And good morning to folks who are just joining us now. We have just started this. We're letting everybody who has queued up to come in. My name is William Spear. My colleague is Sophie Werner. We're both from the Office of Export Promotion. We've got a fairly full program today, but we are going to wait just a moment or two to allow everybody to get in and to get comfortable with the surroundings and things like that. So give us just another, I don't know, maybe a half minute or so. And we welcome everybody who's joined us thus far. And just so everybody knows, this is being recorded. If you're uncomfortable with that, please log out now and we'll make sure that our partners there in Atlantic County have access to the recording and can make it available offline as well. So, but aside from that, Sophie, I think if you're comfortable, let's go ahead and start this.
Sounds wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here on this overcast day. Bill, if you could go to the next slide. We'd like to start by thanking all of our valued local partners. Specifically, we would like to thank Michael Chait of Greater Atlantic City Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for your support, Lauren Moore, Max Lesher, and Gabe, who has just joined us. I'm sorry, Gabe Stano. Thank you so much for being here today from the Atlantic County Economic Alliance. And thank you so much to the Chamber of Commerce of Southern New Jersey, specifically Christina Renna, President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of Southern New Jersey. So thank you all for your support in making this event happen. We are going to kick things off by launching a welcome survey. So if you can all take a moment to respond, it should appear. It should appear now. There are 3 questions to respond. One is in reference to the type of business you are in. The second asks if you have ever sold your product or service to a buyer outside of the United States. Have you ever exported? And then the last question is, are you actively marketing your company internationally? So we like to get a feel for who's in the room as we kick things off. So I see some responses coming in. Thank you. And if you're not seeing the poll, it's possible that it appeared on a different screen if you have multiple screens like me. Sometimes the windows get lost. Wonderful. So it looks like we've got a lot of new to export companies here. And if you would like, feel free to share in the chat the type of business specifically. I know we had some folks select other. So if you'd like to share what kind of business you are in the chat, it is always great to know who we're speaking with. Right, I'm going to leave the poll open for one more moment. All right. Okay, thank you. Got about half of folks respond, so we appreciate that. All right. Looks like we already have a Q&A. Chat is disabled. Okay, thank you so much, Jeff. If you want to toss in the Q&A what your business is, feel free to share your business type there. I think this is a function of the webinar default setting. I think you should be able to chat with us, with hosts and panelists. But we are going to kick things off. I'm going to pass it back to William Spear to get us started and tell us a little bit about the Business Action Center before we jump into the topic of today. Thank you.
Hey, Sophie, thank you so much. And today's event has really one objective, and that is to begin to share some of the tools related to considering exporting, provide a bit of a rationale, and then also we are going to have a kind of a case study towards the very end of that. Pretty exciting. Sophie and I had a good time coming up with that. So we're going to add those things in. Um, Now, with regards to who we are at the Business Action Center, um, we provide, in our view, world-class technical support and services and resources to the business community here in New Jersey. That business community sometimes is very, very, very large, and you wouldn't necessarily think they would have a need for the Business Action Center, but that's not the case. And then we also work with entrepreneurs and those companies that are just coming online and provide resources for those particular companies as well. And so everything in within that spectrum across all industries and across all parts of the state. So that is what we do. And then with regards to how we see the state's economy, um, if you've ever had an occasion to travel around and talk with the different business owners, the economy of the state of New Jersey is as vibrant as the individuals who own those businesses. And that vibrancy, that is where we want to be in the center of that. We want to be able to provide our expertise, provide our resources to those individuals who are starting their businesses, who are running their businesses, perhaps expanding their businesses. And that's where we see ourselves to be in the very, excuse me, the very center of that excitement, of that energy. And as I said a moment ago, we place ourselves in that middle. You can see right there within that triangle, the back as part of the Department of State. The back is led by our management, Melanie Willoughby, Penny Wild, and within the Department of State, led by Lieutenant Governor Tahisha Way. We see ourselves, as I stated with the mission, as I stated with our objective, being in the center of those sides of that triangle of activities to communicate, to collaborate, and to connect, and to do that on behalf of the companies here in the state of New Jersey. And that is who we are. Many people in that picture, taken, I think, about 18 months ago. That's who we are. And as to the back, there are 5 different areas in which we comprise of. One is business advocacy. You may know the name Stephen Milgram and his folks over there. They function as basically project managers for those companies that are domestically expanding, looking maybe even to consolidate activities, but they provide those resources. They just recently had a webinar on trying to manage energy costs here in the state. Um, Terrifically successful. I want to say they had a couple hundred people for that. But that's Steve and his colleagues. The Office of Export Promotion, that's Sophie and I, as well as our 2 colleagues, Jean Chang. Jean, I know you're out there on this today. I say hello to you again. We spoke earlier. And then a 4th colleague who was not able to make us today. She make today's event. She had commitments elsewhere. Marielle Wolf. Small business advocacy, you may know the name of Don Newman and his colleagues. Imagine, instead of being a project, imagine something transactional. And through the chat line, business.nj.gov or 1-800-Jersey-7, and I will repeat that a couple times just in case anybody sees Don and says, oh yeah, they brought that up several times. They help with kind of single items, single topics of discussion. Where on the Treasury website do I get this? How do I proceed to get a permit in my community, et cetera? That's their currency. That's their realm, and they do it very, very well. Office of State Planning, Walter Lane, um, in the midst of just tremendous success with the state plan, and then the Cannabis Training Academy, Tahi Chappell, who is about 15 feet from Sophie and I right now here in Trenton. All of these are business facing. 4 of the 5 are business facing. State planning is more municipality facing, but that's their role. And wherever a company is in its size, its journey, et cetera, there's going to be somebody here in the office or in the Business Action Center that can help with that company. And all of what I've just said hopefully lines up with that statement, because that's what we believe we do. This is what we aim to do. Businesses in the state of New Jersey raise questions, ask for insight, and we provide those solutions. And then connecting with the back, we do have our social handles, LinkedIn, X now, not X, and then Facebook. And again, 1-800-Jersey-7. Don Newman would be very, very upset with me if I did not make that point on a regular basis. Now, within all of that is the Office of Export Promotion. And again, that's where Sophie Werner and I and our colleagues, Jean Chang and Marielle Wolf, um, provide services to the state. And today's training is actually a component of that export assistance, in which we help small and mid-sized companies to begin exporting, to expand exporting, to help them grow their revenue base through international sales while creating jobs here in the state of New Jersey. Now, one of the things that we do talk about a lot, no matter how well planned, there's always going to be a moment in which an export transaction or potential transaction doesn't go quite as well or as expected. That's that middle component there, export advocacy. We try to help New Jersey companies navigate different things that are going on around the world. It could be a shipment stuck in a port. It could be helping out on a bid process in another country, etc. But in those moments when things are not going well, in terms of what should transparently happen, this office steps in to try to do that, to try and provide some kind of insight. And then we're also the grantee for Foreign Trade Zone 44 out of Mount Olive. The Foreign Trade Zone is a really highly focused, tightly focused entity that is a facilitator of typically large volumes or large values of trade that have a select amount of processing going on. And we can have that conversation. In fact, Gene manages that relationship with us on our behalf. We can certainly go into that uh, as the day goes on or as the program goes on. And now on the introduction to exporting, this is where I'm going to bring Sophie back in. And she is going to begin talking about some of the planning, some of the researching, etc., that goes into that. And Sophie, I see you've come back on camera, and it is all yours.
Thank you so much, Bill. All right, so we are now getting to the meat and potatoes of the presentation. So this webinar is geared towards new to export companies, and based on the survey that we conducted at the beginning of the call, and I know some folks have joined since then, uh, the uh, the majority of the folks here are new to export. So we will address a lot of the content focused on that, but I do want to emphasize that the resources we will go over will be relevant as you continue to expand and are able to sell into various markets. These resources will still be relevant for you. So I'm going to ask you all to bookmark a number of web pages today. But if you did not have a reason to be here, we are going to give you a couple. We're going to start with the business case for exporting so that there is so that you all have several tangible reasons to be here, not just to be here today, but to dedicate the time, research, and resources needed to get your export strategy off the ground. So, first of all, of course, increasing your sales by tapping into international markets. Over 95% of the world's consumers live outside of the United States and its territories. So, to not tap into that vast majority of consumers would be a missed opportunity, to say the least. To smooth your business cycles during domestic lulls, it'll help you handle the fluctuations of the domestic market, and it'll help you to be more likely to stay in business. Of course, increasing the valuation of your business by increasing your sales and also increasing your competitiveness by having that exposure to global markets. And then utilizing that full capacity of all that you have already invested in. So your production systems, your personnel, and sales, and your admin components. This will have them firing on all cylinders. If you can go to the next slide, please. We're going to briefly go over today's agenda. We will start with the export readiness self-assessment, and that self-assessment will be sent as a follow-up. And we will also have a link for you to schedule a one-on-one follow-up call to discuss the self-assessment, to discuss your answers to the self-assessment. We're going to go over them briefly today, and then some of the information will help you inform, I'm sure, how you will answer some of the questions. Then the management commitment to exporting, because it all starts with commitment on the top level of the company. Then we will discuss topical trade barriers and trade opportunities, evergreen issues that exists, and other opportunities that are there to help facilitate trade. Then we will get into export plan development and international market research for both service-based companies and product-based companies. Then we have a case study on a food marketing. So this is food manufacturing, rather. This is a fictional company, Capital Blueberries, of which Bill and I are the co-owners for the purposes of this presentation. Then we'll jump into Q&A and then talk about some next steps. We're going to start with the export readiness self-assessment. Next slide, please. The first question that you need to ask yourself is your company ready to grow? And a great indicator of that is having some level of success in the domestic market. If you are less than 1 year in business, it may not be advisable to look to venture into international markets. And also thinking about obtaining financial resources. The less time you have in business, the less years of tax returns you have to provide to your banker in order to get a loan, and the less paper trail that you have for your business. So it is really advisable to get a couple solid years of domestic business under your belt prior to venturing out into global markets. So really, this question is asking if you are ready to grow, and even if you may not be there yet, perhaps you are a business that registered yesterday and have just started out and are looking to sell domestically first. This is still information that it's good to know about from the beginning, because a lot of the considerations we'll talk about are considerations that if you have already been in business for a while, it's not as easy to kind of rewrite your playbook. So thinking, from the start about where you'd like to grow, and using an export plan to do so is absolutely best practice. The second question, which we will address in more detail, is about the company's management commitment to developing export markets. This is not a magic bullet. This is not something that is a get-rich-quick scheme. This is going to take time, as you know, business and cultivating dedicated clients and retaining those clients. It takes work, and this is no different. But when you think about additional factors such as, cultural barriers and time zone differences, we give an example of, let's say you are servicing a client and that client calls you on a U.S. national holiday such as Thanksgiving. Your client in Switzerland does not observe that holiday and is looking to get assistance, timely assistance. How are you going to handle those inquiries that may pop up as you expose yourself to international markets and reap the benefits, but also making sure that you're providing that high level of customer support as well. Sufficient production capacity. So are you ready for a increase in demand? Are you ready to meet that? What kind of financing or what kind of lines of credit, or you want to get that lined up before you need it. You don't want to have to say no to an order because you aren't able to fulfill it, or you also don't want to give incredibly long lead time. So all of the regular business considerations, but even really thinking down the line, how are you going to grow sustainably and what kind of financing do you need to do so? And talk to your banker now about your plans so that you are not surprising them when you're asking them to get you connected with the SBA's department on, because the SBA does have export financing that are incredible tools for US exporters. But it's great to just have that open relationship with your banker, and get connected sooner rather than later. Next slide, please. Um, Financial resources, again, similar point, making sure that it's not just about production, but also looking at, as I had just talked about with our Thanksgiving example, the customer follow-up and customer retention, and looking at the whole customer life cycle and how you're going to be able to support those additional clients. For intellectual property protection, your U.S. intellectual property protection will not afford you any protection abroad, and you'll need to apply and pay fees for each overseas IP right that you apply for. And you're going to want to look into the specifics and the lifespan of these protections, because they may vary, they may and they will vary from the ones that you may be familiar with domestically. And this question also importantly highlights, do you also have US intellectual property protection? Because as you grow and expand your business and increase your visibility, you want to make sure that you are protected at home and abroad, and that you have your trademarks, patents, etc., that you need for your company, so that you're protected at home and abroad. Regarding your packaging, so if you are a product-based business, you need to look at, of course, the regulations. What are the local, if you have some kind of food or beverage product or some kind of beauty product, you're going to need to the local health regulations, and making sure that you are meeting all of those specific requirements and labeling, but of course also the cultural preferences. So you want to be able to resonate with the consumer. So thinking of different colors, symbols, and designs that hold significance in different cultures, and thinking of that when you're designing when you are making a design for a particular market. And just because the markets may speak the same language that your packaging is in now does not mean that you don't want to make adaptations to best fit the market. And then, of course, even though many countries are Spanish speaking, of course, they have all unique cultures and unique product tastes, and, of course, requirements. So just making sure that you are being incredibly responsive to the local customers, or if you're B2B, to the local business practices of your prospective buyers. Next slide, please. For shipping and also export payment, all of these items are absolutely something you're going to need to have information on. There are ways, of course, as you know, to delegate out components of the business, but you will need to know the bare minimum, so that you know that you are getting a good broker, if you decide to work with one, to help you move your goods from here to the port of entry, or all the way inland into the country that you are shipping the product to. But making sure that you know that you are responsible at the end of the day for the product getting through, and you will be held responsible for any customs violations. So lack of knowledge does not, or lack of awareness of regulations does not get you out of having to comply with them, as we all know. So making sure that you are aware of all of the requirements. The Customs and Border Protection is a wonderful resource. I recommend subscribing to their updates. They've got a lot of different subtopics that you can select based on your industry. For payment methods, of course, you want to make sure that you are able to get paid And just like with all other aspects of your sale, this could be a this could be something that could incentivize prospective buyers if you're able to give terms of payment, if you depending on how much you are going to require up front, how you're going to lay that out. So you want to make sure that um, you have a very secure way to get paid. If you have to put it in escrow, there's a lot of different options. And then for lastly, U.S. export controls and compliance. So the vast majority of exports do not require a license, but of course there's a big asterisk. There's always exceptions. If your product has any kind of um, defense use or dual use, where it could be used for civilian or military purposes, that is going to absolutely require um, additional licenses and requirements. So you're going to be looking, at even if you do not have a defense related product or service, you still want to make sure that you confirm that your specific commodity or your specific service does not require a license. And it's not just about the product or service that you are selling, but who is the buyer. So there are sanctions not just on countries, but on specific actors or specific buyers, individuals. So making sure that you are not selling to a company that is not you are not permitted to sell to, and that is again something you are responsible for completing that due diligence on. Next slide, please. And so I know I threw a lot at you with those 9 questions. That is just a quick introduction. Again, we're going to send those 9 questions over. Hopefully, you'll get some resources today that will help you think through those. But what we do ask is that if you'd like to have a conversation one-on-one about your export readiness self-assessment, you send us what you have, schedule a time, and we will go through it line by line. If you have more questions than answers, that's fine. And the main theme of those questions is you need to have a long-term outlook to developing an export strategy that's going to build a sustainable export aspect of your business, and that it's integrated into the heart of your business. And for more on management commitment to exporting, I'm going to pass it to my manager, William Spear.
Sophie, thank you so much. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to take a phrase that Sophie just used in her preceding discussion, and that is a long-term outlook for sustainable success. Really, the only way that is practically achievable or able to be achieved is by a management down commitment to exporting. And it is going to be that commitment, not just to the business operation of exporting, but the commitment of resources, the commitment of time, the commitment of energy. This is all before spending money, by the way. And so all of all of the commitment, all of the intention of beginning the process of exporting really is going to start and filter its way down. And the reason that is so true is that management at the top level or the highest levels of the entity will be able to tap into resources that perhaps a mid-level executive can't. And in this case, we're going to flip this. The list that Sophie has here is that the moment you start talking about selling into other countries, you automatically or very nearly automatically going to want to include your bankers, your lawyers. If you have the luxury of working with any brokers who might be remotely connected with exports or customs, et cetera, you want to get their feedback before you really even initiate a transaction. Sophie said a moment ago when she was talking about financing, you want to have that lined up, and financing is not everybody's appetite. financing of international transactions. So as you go through, and again, Sophie said we're putting a lot in front of you. One of the first steps early on is going to be finance or find out if your current finance partners have that appetite, have that willingness to look at a transaction into, you know, pick a country, Madagascar, France, Malaysia, etc. That will become a key component because as Sophie said, you don't want to be in a situation where you had success. Somebody is saying, yeah, I'd like to get whatever a sizable order is from you, and then you not have the financial resources to fulfill that order. So in addition to that, to financing one of your as your key partners, having a common message across all members of the management team so that everybody can uh, um, articulate a value proposition for beginning the process to export, increasing sales, normalizing your business cycle here in the United States, et cetera. All those things can only help to have the same message come from the entire leadership team. And then from our perspective, one of the things that resonates the most with how we try to encourage companies to look at this, um, exporting is not an accessory. It's not an add-on. I remember when my grandparents used to drive me around, they had a magnificent 57 Chevy, some of the finest tail fins I've ever seen in my life. But exporting is not a tail fin. It is the equivalent of part of the engine. So don't view exporting as an add-on. Really, you want to treat it as if it's a core component of your overall sales and revenue strategy today, tomorrow, a year from now. And then again, all of these points are going to lead the company towards what Sophie described as this putting the company in a place to realize long-term sales success, international sales success. Now, along the way too, there are going to be some barriers. And, I'm sure everybody has seen in the news the word tariff, certainly over the last 3 or 4 months. For what it's worth, tariffs have been around forever. And it is a tool that has different uses. When this country first started, tariffs were used to promote the development of certain industries. And that practice still goes on elsewhere. So tariffs are not a new thing by any stretch of the imagination, but they do have to be part of the overall plan to achieve that success we've talked about. Now, there is also this other entity called a non-tariff trade barrier, and that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult to begin to assess if those are there. A tariff, for those companies that we're talking with today that are looking to sell into another country, each country publishes its tariffs, probably not just from the United States, but from any country in the world. And so it's getting a hold of their tariff and their duty rates almost always based upon your harmonized code, which Sophie and I are going to go into in a bit. But it's not just the tariffs that can cause friction. There are a host of other things, the non-tariff trade barriers. Like imagine being fully aware of the tariff or any kind of port of entry duty or fee, and then getting 25 kilometers in, and suddenly you've got to stop at a checkpoint for an inspection. These things happen. They happen on a regular basis, and they serve different things, different purposes. One is to collect revenue. Another might be to ensure the integrity of a product. The third might be just to discourage trade from other countries. So non-tariff trade barriers are as big of a of a discussion point or a planning point as are trade barriers. Now, the flip side of all that are those instances that smooth away trade. Historically, these are called free trade agreements. They have other names as well, but they are usually through economic blocks. If you look at United States, Canada, and Mexico. That's an economic bloc. And over the last, I want to say 30 years, there has been concerted efforts to reduce those tariffs. Yes, I understand that's not the case necessarily right now, but you also see efforts to bring those back down. So there are trade agreements that facilitate trade, and that also may go into planning where your export markets are that you want to begin to plan to access. Again, here's some more details, the non-tariff barriers. Read those. Everybody's going to have the slides afterwards. But these are things that are not specific tariffs, but cause friction, get in the way of smooth transactions. And then on the tariff side as well, a little bit there. Um, all of these are almost all of them are in the news right now. So, but again, as Sophie has extended the invitation, we can certainly have an offline conversation about this as well. With regards to the trade opportunities, these are the kinds of not agreements, but the language that's used to develop or identify where there might be easier ways to conduct trade. All of those are in place right now, and it it really is. It takes some of the sting out, and it takes some of the friction out of moving a product from here in New Jersey, out of Atlantic County, and trying to get it into France or the EU or one of the CAFTA countries as well. So there are other things that can help with the process as well. And then what I'd like to do now, you've you've gotten kind of a message across a 2 or 3 football field wide area. But I'd like to bring Sophie back in to begin harmonizing or normalizing all of that information and begin synthesizing that into the development of an export plan. So Sophie, I'm going to turn it back over to you again.
Thank you, Bill. So we are going to talk about your export plan. Next slide, please. So these key areas of consideration will probably look very familiar to you all, as I would hope that everyone has slash is updating their business plan. As we know, the business plan is a living, breathing document, not just for startup companies, but as a tool for financing, as a blueprint for your business, as a tool for training and making sure that internal um, stakeholders are aligned, and also to find, to externally, as mentioned, to acquire financing and buy-in from investors, perhaps. But the export plan is similar in many ways to that of your business plan. You're going to look at the product or service, but all of these areas you're going to want to look at from the perspective of the potential markets that you're looking at. So there might be some innate characteristics of your product or service that you know need to be adapted for certain markets. For your financial capacity, we did speak about that a bit, but really making sure that you have a plan for how you are going to acquire the needed financing, and how to tap into. I know I mentioned the SBA, but the U.S. Small Business Administration has export financing, and that does include a line of credit. They also have products now that are for both domestic and export operations. So, different flexible opportunities that can give you the confidence and the ability to fulfill a contract that you fought so hard to see to the finish line. For promotion, thinking about the different ways in which you will promote traditional and digital, as well as any types of trade shows that you are that are important to the industry that perhaps you can attend to meet face to face with your buyers, brokers, or distributors. Experience and specifically experience in international business or international trade. Perhaps you have some language skills on your team that you can tap into. Just making sure that if you have cultural ties or if you have experience working in another market, these are all things to don't forget about those assets, those non-monetary assets that you can bring to the table, and that goes in line with your personnel and thinking of any additional team members you'll need to bring on in order to see this through. And also assigning roles, so that's both for the personnel and the management, making sure that it is very clear who is responsible for payments, who is responsible for interacting with your insurance broker, who is the frontline contact person for the customers in X market. So making sure that it's very that everyone is aligned and signed on, and when things are calm, of course, oh, we'll figure it out. But making sure that you are ready for that crunch time, when the siren is blaring, that you are ready to spring into action. And it's clear who needs to do what. So kind of getting ready for that fire drill scenario. So pricing considerations, as Bill had mentioned, both tariff and non-tariff barriers exist in most markets. But the flip side of that is there are many free trade agreements and different ways in which the United States has created ways to soften or lower those barriers. But being mindful of that and work that into your pricing consideration, looking at the landed cost, you should be able to get quotes from a broker on, okay, how much would the landed cost of your product be into a particular market, so that you can see, what it would, what your profit margins are, what kind of pricing would you need for it to be viable, and then of course other similarly positioned companies. So if look at other companies that are importing into that region or into that country, that province, and see what are they charging, and more than likely they are, you'll probably be around the same ballpark if they are all facing the same tariffs and other fees to sell into the area. Production capacity, and that can apply to both service and product-based businesses. For services, it is going to be your time and going to be your staff. So making sure that you have, whether it's you're working with independent contractors to bring on specific client-specific roles to complete a project, making sure that you have that growth plan, and even are working on it could be job descriptions of the future future key roles that you're going to need, kind of starting that much sooner than you think you need it. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the export plan process is similar to the startup business plan, and in a way you are starting a new business. You are applying your success domestically into a different, you're overlaying it in a different scenario, in a different space, in specific international markets. And I do want to highlight the importance of focusing on specific markets. We talk to clients all the time and we hear, oh, I can sell anywhere. That's wonderful. But you really want to focus in on, even your top 3 markets, so that you can dedicate the needed time and attention to developing those markets, making contacts, doing research, because they are all going to have unique challenges and unique opportunities. So you don't want to spread yourself too thin and not be able to excel anywhere by trying to excel everywhere. So, as small businesses, you all have a finite marketing budget. So if you were trying to market everywhere, you would have, little to no ability to actually get the message across. So thinking of where your investment would be best served, look at your ROI, and think about what will what will have that return the highest likelihood of success. So that is directly tied to the importance of researching and analyzing those markets prior to putting any money out there on targeted ads or anything that's going to help you get in front of buyers from those markets. Next slide, please. So this is a sample export plan outline. So there's a lot in here, but the big sections, of course, we're starting with an export policy commitment statement. This is going to be all the key members of your management team. You want to draft this, you want to review it, make sure that you can all sign on in the moment and in the future. So this is something, as Bill mentioned, this is a part of the motor. This is something that's going to keep the business going. It's not just an add-on, but this is something that is key to the business's success. Looking at the situation or background analysis, again, really seeing, okay, what are we working with? What kind of products are going to qualify under the free trade agreements? That may include the countries of interest. Of course, we talked about export control compliance. We will be talking a little bit about product classifications in a couple slides because that's very relevant to market research. But looking at all of the different considerations for your marketing, as well as the distribution methods and how much of a in-country presence you want to have. And then, of course, having action steps tied to all of those. Next slide, please. The export budget, just like your business plan, you are going to want to have your narrative and your financials, and the financials should really show how all of the incredible information in the narrative section, how that's actually going to play out, and how you are going to be able to pay back that loan or be able to make a profit when you're showing your business plan, for example, to your banker. So implementation schedule and additional information on markets and the competitive environment. We are going to go on to the next slide. And since I did see in the beginning poll that it looks like some service providers, I am going to go through the next slide, Bill, if you don't mind. This is a list of 4 really key international market research tools that are pretty good as introductory tools. You can absolutely go deeper, and we'll talk briefly about some of those tools. But your Census Schedule B commodity data and search tool, that is for product-based businesses. And so is the second one, the U.S. Census Bureau Global Market Finder. If you are a service-based business, you're going to want to highlight the last 2, which is the BEA, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, Interactive Data Application. And then the last one, it does apply to all prospective or existing exporters, the Department of Commerce's country commercial guides. So we're going to quick breeze through the BEA Interactive Data Application. So there is a wonderful introductory video on the homepage that I highly recommend taking the time to watch before jumping in. But we're going to go to the next slide. So you'll see the international section where it says international chart data. You will click on that, and it will take you, next slide, please, to a screen that looks like this. You'll click on interactive data tables. Next slide, please. And it will take you to a listing of different options. For today, we're going to click on international services. Next slide, please. And from here, you can select the table of interest. And from there, you can select specific countries. You can select all countries. You can select specific NAICS codes. So based on your economic activity, and see what are the top, for example, the top exports of of services to different nations. So some of the top U.S. service export markets are UK, Canada, Ireland, Mexico, the UK islands in the Caribbean, Switzerland and Japan, to name a few. Some of our top service sectors are financial services, telecommunications, consulting, and licenses or licensing. So that is just a brief introduction. Again, we can meet one-on-one and go through your specific scenario. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through a quick case study on capital blueberries. Next slide, please. So here is, if you have a product-based business, you are going to want to start on the Schedule B search engine or look through the different publications, which are below in the Browse tab. So there's two ways to look at this. Next slide, please. So you can browse the chapters, which the most recent publication is the Schedule B 2025, and you can look through and find the most accurate number for you, or you can use the search tool. Next slide, please. And before we continue on with the Schedule B, I do want to mention what a Schedule B code is. So this is a 10-digit code that is specific to U.S. exports, and this is a commodity code. So it is different than your NAICS code. Your NAICS code is for your industry or your economic activity. So the Schedule B code, it's used by the U.S. Census Bureau for export monitoring, and it is built upon the 6-digit HS code, which is your harmonized system code, which Bill had mentioned earlier, which is a code used around the world to for customs, import, and export purposes. So you're going to want to know your Schedule B code, which will include that 6-digit HS code, which is applicable in markets around the world, whereas the Schedule B is just for the U.S. So we're going to go through and classify blueberry jam. So for the sake of this fictional business, Bill and I have a blueberry farm in Hamilton, and we had a bump crop this year. So we're going to look at ways to create a agricultural manufactured product to use some of our excess harvest.
Yeah, and it's Soapy, spot on. It was a great crop this year at Capital Blueberries. And normally, or not normally, perhaps the easiest way to think about blueberries is, how do I put them in a container and ship them around the world? And certainly that's got a lot of credibility to it. Sophie and I did a little bit of research, and in terms of just a handful of blueberries or a container full of blueberries, the United States of America in 2024 exported $392 million worth of blueberries. Fantastic. I think all of us would sign up for that. Now, of interesting note, the state of New Jersey exported 57 million during that same time, and we were the third largest state. And so, we would not be going completely off the rails to say, hey, our blueberries, we can begin to ship these to, buyers around the world. And then there's a slightly related or gently related category called frozen only blueberries, still an agricultural product. And the United States of America had 218 million of those particular blueberries. New Jersey had 3 million. We're not quite the same player there. But coming back to where Soapy had started this, the idea of a blueberry jam. In the United States of America, blueberry jams were exported to the tune of $6 million, all states combined. And New Jersey exported 1 million, and we're the fourth largest exporting state of blueberry jam. Now, how did we find that? On this particular screen, were we to hit that classify button, it would begin to give us some different options, perhaps ask for additional inputs. This is where the Schedule B and the harmonized schedule numbers come into play. And this becomes important because it gives you something, and it gives the basis for identifying what a tariff might be for a country you want to sell into. And let's say we want to sell into Japan. We would want to find Japan's tariff codes, and they are published, and look at that and take our harmonized code for our blueberries, plug it in there, and you would begin to get a percentage or a dollar amount of what the additional cost would be for capital blueberries to sell into Japan. And now suddenly something that might not be so normal or easy to conceptualize, we now have some big components of developing an export plan that Sophie's talked about a couple times. Obviously, we've got our product, the jam, we've got our harmonized code we're looking to sell into Japan. We've identified that as a market of interest for us. Now we've got some big things to plug into Sophie's template and begin to develop around that. One of the things we would begin looking at is, what's our financing needs? Let's say we got an order for $50,000 of jam into Japan. Do we have the capacity to finance that? Do we have the machinery to finance that? Do we have the people who might be able to take that on? And this is where everything that Sophie has talked about now becomes a lot more integrated. Now you've got some of the pieces to put together and to begin developing from that a plan to go forward, at least to explore, if not necessarily sell, into Japan. And if Japan doesn't work, then you pull out Japan and insert another country and begin that process alone. Begin that process again. And so that's now where this very non-obvious string of numbers, and Sophie identified it as 10, this is where this becomes to be very, very important. It becomes the DNA of your product in countries around the world, and it will begin to unlock resources, unlock knowledge, unlock information as well. And I also want to go back to a point that Sophie began touching upon. It's probably convenient or easy maybe to have a customs broker or somebody else do this for you. Fine, well and good. We're never going to discourage that. However, the company that is exporting the product is always going to be the company of record, and the company of record is going to be the entity which is responsible for questions that arise. If these get into a foreign market and somebody in that foreign market says, well, these really aren't blueberries, they're blackberries. The distributor or your broker, your customs broker, then they'll turn around to you and say, well, you know, Sophie and Bill, um, Capital Blueberries, this is not really a blueberry. And as such, any kind of fees, any kind of regulations that go along with blueberries might be thrown out the window in lieu of blackberries. So all of this begins to tie together now with the determination of the Schedule B code. Sophie, I'm gonna stop talking and throw it back to you for a moment. If there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, I want to highlight how specific the and Bill highlighted a real world example of how important it is to have the correct um, the correct classification. If you can go to the next slide, please. There are various questions on the left side when we put in blueberry jam. Was asking about known characteristics, and you can adjust those if they're not accurate. Was asking for basically the type of preparation of of the of the blueberries. Um, and as Bill mentioned, this is also a very different chapter. I believe it went from chapter what 4 to 20.
Uh, 8 is the
Eight.
agricultural
Okay,
products. Yeah.
sorry, 8 to 20, because this is a prepared, this is a preparation of fruit. So looking at all of the specifics and making sure you have the most accurate, so we can get all the way down to, let's say it's blueberry jam, let's say it's a paste. That would be 200799800. So next slide, we put that number into the Global Market Finder, which is a wonderful resource for both product, a wonderful resource for product-based businesses. And it is, I think, just a nice way. And all of this data is through census. It's just different ways of looking at it, different interfaces. But you can look, for example, at the top countries that receive exports of U.S. blueberries. Next slide, please. And then to tie it all together and to bring back in the service-based folks, the country commercial guides offer a wealth of information from in-country based U.S. representatives. So through the U.S. Department of Commerce, the Foreign Agricultural Service, to name a few, prepare these reports and make sure that they are up to date with the most the most recent market intelligence for U.S. Companies, and these are prepared by individuals that their job is to protect the interest of U.S. companies abroad. So you are getting it from a friendly source. Next slide, please. This is just a brief a brief overview of the Canada Country Commercial Guide. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to highlight that there is a agricultural sector section within the Canada Commercial Guide, and even lists the top 10 growth for packaged food products. And did want to shout out number 4, which includes the fruit and nut bar. So perhaps that is something maybe, Bill, we should look into at Capital.
I think so. I think so.
But I am seeing the time. Bill and I both love to talk, so I do want to go to the next slide.
There's a curse of trade people everywhere.
For questions and answers, we are going to end the recording, and I do see a question, and we will answer that question. We can just stop the recording, and we'll move on to questions.